The topic we're going to talk about today is almost humorous, work-life balance with what's going on with us in our communities right now.
Well, I guess it could have been humoral.
Yeah. But I think, generally speaking, we all, especially, in the medical field, specifically perfusionists that might be watching, could kind of chuckle, work-life balance. Mm-hmm. Am I serious about it? I actually am.
That's a great show, a great slide.
Uh-oh. There we go.
There it is.
Hey, so let's talk about it. What is it? It's a buzzword, right? We've all heard it. HR people talk about it. You're recruited to companies. That's one of the things they're often going to tell you now.
Yeah, I lied to you. How many times?
There's lots of different definitions out there, but they all kind of come to the same end results, and that's that you're trying to find an equilibrium between your responsibilities at work and your responsibilities in your personal life. That can be leisure time if that's what's, going on in your personal life. It could be family time. It could be, you time, travel time, whatever. Mm-hmm. The point is that you're not neglecting your personal life for professional life responsibilities. I thought this was kind of neat. I loved it. In fact, it's a little balance. You got a little life going on. You got a little work going on. And when I hear work-life balance, that's kind of what I think of. But really, we should be thinking of something like this, more of a seesaw. Sometimes more responsibilities are going to be at work, and sometimes more responsibilities are going to be at home. And I think changing your perspective a little bit on that will help you be able to see how you can have, a work-life balance where you're satisfied in both areas of your life. Okay, so let's talk about how the imbalance develops. Well, it develops when, you either have pull from one or the other, either home or from work. Work, it's often increased working hours, whether you have increased work that's being done. For us, caseloads, you have staffing shortages, maybe you have decreased budgets, so you have to take on extra responsibilities, or you have a hiring freeze. You have a change in management personnel. They can change how they manage you. They expect more of you. Or just changing your job duties. And that can apply to any kind of job, of course. You have increased responsibilities at home. Maybe you have a family, you get married, you have kids, or maybe you have lots of social obligations you move or health issues. And one that people don't often think about, at least I didn't until I started researching it, is you have changing life goals. Mm-hmm. You're different in the beginning of your career versus the middle of your career or approaching retirement. You have different goals. You have different ideas of what that balance might look like. And out of everything that I read from, all of these different business companies that, focus on teaching companies how to offer work-life balance, one of the main things that they talked about was work-life balance is different to everyone. It's a very personal definition. And so figuring out where your work-life balance exists, what you need to make your life work, is the most important thing to do it. Mm-hmm. Okay, I thought this was kind of appropriate, especially in medicine. It says the good news is you've been promoted to head of the team.
That's like chief of the department and you're the only perfusionist.
Yeah. The not so good news is you are the team. Okay, so why should we care about this? Some people are like, I signed up for this job, especially in medicine. I knew it was going to be demanding. I'm good with it. It's all right. Let's just do it. Let's just get on with it. Mm-hmm. Well, there's reasons why we should, and the number one reason is burnout. I think we all are familiar with that word. This is actually what the World Health Organization defines burnout to be, and I darkened in red what I thought was the most important. Burnout's, it's going to happen, but you're going to get tired, you're going to get overwhelmed. I mean, your job's going to change, your life is going to change. But it's not successfully managing it that leads to the consequences that can greatly affect your job satisfaction, your home life. It could be divorce, it could be all kinds of things. These are the major symptoms of true burnout, and the point is that you're going to feel these things sometimes, But if you don't successfully manage them, or the situation doesn't, rectify itself because you get less work, you get more people, then you can have detrimental results. All right, specifically burnout in medicine. I thought this was really interesting. I couldn't find any articles about burnout as perfusionist, although we know it exists. But I did find a couple interesting articles specifically for physicians that I thought could be very applicable to pretty much anybody in medicine. These were the exact 5 things that they said leads to burnout. Working as a clinician, just in general, because you are a clinician, you are going to have burnout at some point, because you can't just say, I'm not going to do that work today. You're taking care of people. You have responsibilities, whether you want to be, working 50 hours one week. Sometimes you're going to have to. Specific job responsibilities. That could be anything from, the type of institution you work in. Maybe you work in an academic institution and it's extremely busy. Maybe you work in a community hospital and it's not busy, and you can have burnout from not having enough work, if you could believe that.
I believe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess you could believe that right now.
Touche on that.
Having a life. I thought that was kind of funny. Of course, we all have a life, but I guess what they were getting at is wanting to experience things outside of work. Some people are more work focused, and so maybe they don't notice that sort of burnout from the working so many hours and so many responsibilities. But even in those people who are perfectly happy with the amount of workload, they're carrying a lot of stress, and the stress is very detrimental. Leadership skills of your immediate supervisor are a huge impact. They set the example often on how work should be done. If you're in an office setting, if they're always working late and they're always sending you emails at 2 a.m., you feel like that's the work standard and you have to live up to that work standard. In medicine, it could be asking you to stay after, all the time with no giving back to you. That happens a lot as perfusionists who are mostly salaried employees. I think that can happen, especially when you're working in an institution type situation, staffing shortages and those things. I thought this was interesting too, because even though perfusionists don't necessarily have the same medical training as a doctor, I think the conditioning is the same. You are conditioned that you are not to take time off, that you show up when you're sick, and that all has to do with patient care, because we have a great responsibility in patient care. But, they've been getting away from that more and more with physicians. They've got these medical student work week rules and all those sorts of things. But I think as perfusionists... Residents too.
Fellows.
Right.
Yeah.
I think as perfusionists, we've kind of been overlooked in that. Nursing, they have their overtime, they kind of control it that way, but we're kind of in between, in that a lot of times we're salaried employees, so it doesn't cost them any more to keep us there, but the regulations for how much is acceptable work is not really there. And because you're often the only person or only few people in the institution that can do your job, you feel an obligation to show up, an obligation to do the work. Not just pressure maybe from your, inappropriate pressure, but pressure from yourself to do a good job, because you believe in what you're doing. You want your program to survive. They're not going to hire anyone else. So if you don't do it, your surgeon's not going to have people to do it, and maybe your surgeon won't come there anymore, and then all of a sudden what happens to your program?
Or your colleagues.
Or whatever.
You have to pick up your load.
Yeah.
These were the 4 traits that they've listed in this article that lead to burnout. People who have, a superhero type, they're the only ones who can kind of do their job. Person who's a workaholic just because maybe they don't have an outside life, that's getting back to, they may be perfectly happy with working all those hours, but it's still going to have detrimental effects. Perfectionists, and then lone rangers, who don't want help from anybody. The symptoms: exhaustion, physical, emotional, depersonalization. I think this is the one that I have witnessed the most. You're negative about everything. You're cynical. You have compassion fatigue. You, especially in medicine, you know, that's so dangerous. You don't see your patients as, you know, real human beings. You're just tired. You just show up and you do the work that you can do because you're just exhausted. And doubting a lack of efficacy, you know, doubting that you're doing quality work, you have a lack of purpose. Whatever I do today doesn't matter. It's still going to be here tomorrow, etc. The associated consequences: you give lower quality care, you have a higher rate of medical errors and mistakes, a higher rate of job dissatisfaction, higher rate of alcohol and drug use due to stress, and a higher rate of suicide. I thought this was great. It's talking about analysts, but I thought it was very appropriate. You know, the good news is that we were able to solve the work-life balance problem for our analyst. We just added more work. Okay, so after talking about all of this, is it even possible? Well, it is if you believe it and if you're willing to do the work for it. All the articles that I read said it's your personal responsibility for you to get work-life balance. It's no one else's. Companies are going to offer things that they, you know, tools and promote wellness and the things like that, but really it's up to you. And apparently it is possible because this is taken from the Mayo Clinic College of Medicine, Exploring Health Careers. This is how they describe perfusionist. And I bolded the thing that I thought that was the most important is that they say we report that we maintain an appropriate work-life balance.
And this is at Mayo?
This is if you were exploring careers just in general for being a cardiovascular perfusion. They tell you all about it, and this is what they describe it. I thought that was interesting. So it's out there. It's being advertised.
I think it's fundamentally wrong, but okay.
Okay. Well, now that we've decided it's possible, how do we get there? Okay, so this was taken not from a medical perspective. It was just taken, generally speaking, from a business perspective. But I think all of these things, and this is where I kind of want some input from you guys, can be applied to people in medicine. First off, you've got to accept that there's no perfect work-life balance. Sometimes it's going to be more work, and sometimes it's going to be more life. And it's not analyzed on a day-to-day or even week-to-week basis. It's over periods of time, just like life. Find a job that you love. And that, you know, we're all in a career, hopefully, that we're staying in. But that could also mean finding the job in this career that you love, that promotes the kind of things about the job that you love. You know, if you like to teach, maybe being in an academic institution is good for you.
Or be a part of PerfWeb.
Or being a part of PerfWeb. Or, you know, maybe you like complex cases and that's what you get joy out of. Go to a place that does that. So it's finding the job that fits you. Making sure to prioritize your health and well-being. You know, I think especially women take this all the time. You know, your kids are sick and your husband's sick or whatever, but you don't have time to be sick yourself.
Right.
The same thing goes for workers. You have to take time to take care of yourself and your well-being. It's important for the kind of job that you're going to do once you're at work anyway. Don't be afraid to unplug. And they were kind of talking about technology here, but I really took it as don't be afraid to take mental breaks. You know, sometimes we're in the operating room and we have to be on, that you're working then. And then other times you've got a little downtime. It's okay to turn it off, you know, take a 10-minute break if you've got the break to not do any work and just mentally reset. And I think that's really important, especially, you know, when you're in medicine and you're taking care of someone's life. Take a vacation. Take your PTO when you can. It's important to mentally recharge.
Except during the COVID crisis.
Except during COVID.
When all vacations were canceled.
You can't go.
You can't go anywhere anyway. Make time for yourself and your loved ones. And I think this was one of the most important things that I didn't really think about. This article talked a lot about, and actually another book that I ended up reading that I'll reference because it's a really entertaining read, and it talks about work-life balance, not from medicine, but just from a a reporter for the Washington Post mom, just trying to do everything that she could to be the mom she's supposed to be, to bake the cupcakes, to write the report, to, you know, investigate reports, publish, all of those kinds of things. But you actually need to make scheduled time when you're planning out your week or your day or whatever, where you're going to make time to do something for yourself and make time for your loved ones. It's not just going to happen if you don't make a plan for it, especially in a busy kind of career like medicine. Set boundaries for your work hours. Now, I know that's kind of hard to do for people who are on call. It was hard to do for that mom. She was a reporter when stories happened. She had to do it. But there are times when you can set boundaries and say, you know, tonight I'm not on call. I'm going to have this time where I don't have my phone right next to me. I'm going to do these other things. And then this is the taking control of your own work-life balance, is setting goals and priorities. Where do you want to be in your work life, and what are the things that are important to you in your home life? And then mapping out how you can make that happen. Okay. So these are some suggestions of how to, you know, change your job environment. It's not always convenient just to run out and get another job. So these are some things that you can do. First off, use the resources within your organization. You know, find out what's out there. If you need more help, how can you get more help? Get involved with team planning and leadership roles. If you don't have people who are willing to help you, or you don't have resources, be a part of the planning committees and the things that can make an impact in your day-to-day work life. Hire temporary staff if needed. You know, if there's a budget for it, don't just think that it's a weakness to say that you can't handle the work, especially if you're a one-man kind of show, two-man kind of show. Work on time management of tasks. There's things to do in busy times and there's things to do in slow times. Busy times, we take care of our patients and we do the day-to-day of what has to be done. But there are slow times in medicine. We've got some slow times now. So there's tasks that can be done then that can make your time when you're busy go much better. I think we've been doing a great job of that, you know?
A great job.
Yeah.
Fantastic job.
Yeah. Organization of duties among the team. Don't be the person that needs to do everything. Have other people do things.
Delegate.
Delegate.
I tell people in that are evolving into management roles, if you don't learn to delegate, you will not succeed. It's just plain and simple.
Right. Find what you enjoy about your job. Remember the thing that you got into it, or that you, once you were into it, discovered was your favorite part. There was a study done in physicians that if they could find joy in 20% of their job, that they had job satisfaction. That there was, you know, a lot of other 80% that may not be their favorite part, but 20%, then they found that those physicians were satisfied.
That's interesting.
So it doesn't take much. Yeah. So, you know, you may have a lot of paperwork. Maybe you don't enjoy that, but you really enjoy
20% of their job.
Yes.
Only 20% of their job brought them satisfaction.
Right.
That's really low.
But you may not hate the 80%. It just may not be your favorite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so you're not, okay.
So hone in on something that you enjoy about your job, and then when you're doing that, really enjoy it.
Right.
Because then that can help you when you're doing the things that you don't enjoy, like staying home. Or make sure you have, that you come to work. We're hired to do work, so when you get to work, be productive and do that work, because in the end, the more productive you are with your time, the easier your job should be. And if all of that doesn't work, explore different work situations. There's flexible work situations. There's different ways to be a perfusionist. You know, there's all different kinds of things you can do. You can become more administrative. You can do lots of different things. But the important thing is that you go ahead and consider different work situations that might be able to make you, you know, in a better situation to enjoy your job. Ways to change your home environment. The number one thing everyone says was to-do list. Because if you are in a busy profession, organizing your personal time will really help you manage it better. You know, make the most of our varied schedule hours. I think a lot of us do have the opportunity to, you know, work a different kind of, not 9 to 5, 8 to 5 kind of job. So make the most of those hours. You know, sometimes if you're going to have to work late that evening, but you had your morning free, take advantage of that. Appreciate that.
And that's when you pencil in your run that you wanted to do.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
that you were talking about earlier. Yeah.
And accept that it's not okay. I mean, that it is okay that you're not going to make every family event or social function. I think that's especially hard for women sometimes. But no one makes every, you know, who works is going to make everything. It's not just in medicine. And that's okay. You know, often it's just having a conversation with your kids, you know, reminding them what you do. And I think it's fine. Ask for help if you need it. You know, if you've got those resources, family resources, you know, grandparents, neighbors, friends, husbands, wives. Talk about delegation of responsibilities and duties. You don't have to do it all. Know that situations are going to change, and when they do, there's often growing pains. And try to see if you can just get through this next part. And often, you know, things will resolve themselves. You develop a new, you know, scheduler system, and you end up getting your balance back.
Right.
Find time to de-stress. Talk a little bit more about that actually next week or the week after. We've got a talk coming on about stress, but it's really important, whatever that is, whether it's exercise, whether it's reading, whether it's playing with your kids, it's important to de-stress when you have a very stressful job.
I think it's disasters.
Not that one. There's another one. Stress and nutrition.
I
remember that one. Yeah.
We'll talk more about that later. And remember why you chose this profession and how it's helped you to achieve your personal life goals. Did you choose this profession because, you know, hopefully that you like taking care of patients, but maybe also that it might give you some, you know, flexibility in your schedule, or maybe it was, you know, a salary that you thought would help you achieve your life. So remember that the job you have also helped you get the life that you have. So. All right. Remember that it's up to us to have these conversations, to figure out what we need for our work-life balance. It's never going to be a 50-50 kind of thing. Sometimes it's going to be a 60-20, and sometimes it's going to be a 95-5, you know. And I just thought this was really appropriate. Live in your moment. Enjoy work when you're at work, and when you're at home, enjoy home.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Very good. That was really, really good.
Oh, thanks.
I appreciate that.
I loved what you said about the desensitization. The desensitization part. I really liked what you said, because I think that's important when you're in an on-call profession or you're in a crisis-based profession, that when you feel yourself start desensitizing from what it is that you know you love to do, that's a huge red flag that you've got to do some reevaluation and some self-care. And it's sometimes it's hard to catch that when you're in the moment.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I
think now is a really good time to be thinking about this. Most people have had a lot more time to themselves. Of course, there's some people who are working even more.
But you know, this isn't, I think there's a difference. And let me just say, because we somewhat tongue-in-cheek this a little bit, okay? It's not quality time. It's not quality time. You know, now, this whole issue that's going on, yes, there's a lot of time that we're not working, we're not doing cases, people are sheltered in place, you know, so to speak. But this is an aberration. This is not good.
Well, what I meant was now's the perfect time to maybe implement some of these things, so that when you get back to how your life is, you can have an idea of, hey, this has been really working for me. I'm going to just keep going with what I was doing, or this wasn't working for me, and how can I adapt, either my behavior or my schedule and make it work better for me.
Hey, I didn't realize how much conversation I was actually able to have if I just had dinner with my kids 3 nights a week.
Right.
And let's continue that, because moving forward, I didn't realize how important that was, because I didn't have time or it wasn't a priority
Mm-hmm.
when we were so busy. But
Yeah.
now that it's working, let's make it a point to keep that up.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think you both bring up some excellent points, and I think these two talks, both yours and yours, Tracie's and Tammy's, were really almost interconnected
Mm-hmm.
because they all have a relevance to this, and of course, we're looking at it from a clinical medical perspective, but you don't know when your call comes in of when
Right.
the victim got found.
Right.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of professions like that.
Right.
From a sort of a 30,000 foot view, if you don't mind my using that term, there were some things you said, and I want to kind of go over them with you. So, and I'll just give my perspective, and then I'll ask for you guys to sort of give me yours on what I think. I think there are professional responsibilities that are unique to all of our professions, our jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Those for us as perfusionists, those for those who manage, severe crisis situations and victims, police officers, or even the person that's up in the security thing watching the tables at the casinos.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what job it is. It doesn't make any difference. The professional responsibility, security, I guess would be the term. Security, medicine, victim crisis management, professions, and job responsibilities are not the same. So professional responsibilities and job responsibilities are, in my view, not equal. What say you?
I agree with you 110% because in my job, it was document. And I understand the reason for that. I understand the reason for documenting in a crisis case with a child, why you have to have that for court or whatever. But when paperwork would infringe on my ability to give my best quality care and attention to a child, the paperwork was a professional responsibility. It was a professional requirement, but it made me mad.
It was a job requirement.
It was a job requirement.
Mm-hmm.
But it made me mad because I could not often, there was a lot of times when I was juggling 13 different schools by myself, and you've got to do so much paperwork that you're...
And you really should have only been doing 4 or 5.
Right.
I think that's that's kind of where I'm going with this.
Yeah, and I always put the kids first because, but that, and you find it, like you said, you find a way to get it all done. You find yourself feeling like a superhero, but that's when you find yourself kind of desensitizing.
Or making mistakes,
Yeah.
not intentionally,
No.
of course.
No.
Right.
You're
No.
often you're doing your very best with the situation that you have.
Mhm. What say you?
I think you're absolutely right. I think we do have certain jobs have professional responsibilities that certainly supersede, job responsibilities, as you say. But I also think, I think I know where you're going with this, but I'll just give you my point on this because you're probably going to counter it. I think that in the long run, we can only give our very best for so long. And then at some point, your very best is not your very best anymore. And it's not. And because of the situation where we're dealing with other people's lives, that's also our professional responsibility to recognize that I'm getting in a place where I can't give my best.
It's very well said.
And the patient deserves the very best that is can be offered to them.
Yeah, I think so. I think you probably did know where I was going, and I'll sort of go down the rabbit hole if I can. And it comes to making time. I think you had a slide, and I mean several of your slides I really liked. I'll just go over this one, the one where you had the slide of superhero, workaholic, perfectionist, and Lone Ranger. Okay, so. And I'm coming at this from I guess a supervisory or employee.
Right, I could have gone
employer.
in an entire different route. There was everything from an employer's perspective, but I did it from an individual perspective.
Yes, but I think that's important. I think that's actually even more important. Okay, superheroes. Yeah, and I have a lot. I mean, look, I'm older. I've run the gamut of how I've conducted my life, my personal life, my professional life. I missed every Christmas. I missed every birthday. I missed every with my kids growing up, and I regret it. Still to this day, I regret it. Now, there was a plus, believe it or not, in there. Not a worthwhile plus in my view as I've gotten older and looked back at it, but there was a plus. And my exposure to cases and my ability to do my job was enhanced because of that. Okay, and that was the route that I chose. It's just retrospectively, I think it was wrong. But go ahead.
No, I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to come back to that. So
you can interrupt if you want.
Well, I actually thought I had a slide on this, but I don't know if I clicked through it or what. But where did this concept even come from? It's an interesting evolution, I thought. So work-life balance is a thing we all talk about now. Mm-hmm. Everyone kind of thinks it's, geared at millennials and all these different things, Google doing these fun things. But really, the research that I read was, it's the early beginnings of this began in manufacturing in the late 19th century when women, mothers, and children were working. And so they started limiting hours for the children and for the women because they needed to go home and get their work done for the family.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it kind of started there. And then there was the Fair Trade Employment Act. I think it was in 1938. And that started limiting the work week. So 44-hour work week was what was in play. But that didn't affect professionals. Professionals, doctors, those kind of, they were exempt from that kind of thing. It was expected that they were to be on call all the time. Then the next kind of big thing that came about was during baby boomers' time. Mm-hmm. They went through a lot of uncertainty with, a war. Mm-hmm. And so they were just happy to have a job. And so they worked a lot more hours and were happy to do so. Work-life balance was not anything in their mind. They just wanted to be able to provide for their family. Right. Well, then the children who were being raised by those people, Generation X people.
I'm a boomer.
Yeah. So, and I'm a Generation X person. So they see the parents missing the, the birthdays and the Christmases and the long hours and all of those sorts of things. And so it's already forming in their minds that they're not going to do that. They wish dad was around or mom was around or whatever it was. And so that evolution starts happening. Then dual income households arose from that time period from about 30% to now it's up to around 60% are dual income households. Well, that brought about the women's movement, in the 80s with maternity leave and flexible hours and work share and all those sorts of things. Now the Generation Xers are, adults. It's the 90s. Mm-hmm. It's the early 2000s. And so it really became a thing that they were looking for when they looked for jobs was, how is this going to affect my personal life? Am I still going to be able to, have free time and do that sort of thing? So really had not a lot to do with millennials. It just kind of, became very popular. And in fact, most of the work-life stuff that is offered to millennials now, ping pong tables and all these sorts of fun things. Right. When millennials are surveyed, that's not important to them. Mm-hmm. In fact, most of them are still looking for the same thing that this has been evolving to, is just being able to, make sure that they have a career that they enjoy, but they also have time for family or personal interest. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you should, be so hard on yourself. That was the culture then.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've
especially for a man, very much.
My children have forgiven me, so I mean, I'm okay with it. But it's still, I still do regret it, and I think that it has impacted me now as to how I view others and because I used to have a mentality. I had it where if you were not just 100% dedicated to this job and cared about nothing else, then I thought you were of no value.
You were lacking.
You were lacking
I
or weak.
believed
Yeah,
that.
you were lacking.
Yeah.
And so, it's we learn from our mistakes. I mean, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Because I realized today that was not the best
I think
thing
that's
to do.
great because that gives you a rare insight and empathy into when people need time from work.
Well,
Or
I've
need-
learned
it
that
really,
people are different. Okay, and this is, I think, the thing that sometimes it's baffling to me. Sometimes it's annoying. Sometimes it's just the way it is. Not every person has the same necessarily needs,
Right.
and every person doesn't have the same needs all at the same time or over the period of time. Their
It's
needs even
dynamic.
change. It's all very dynamic. A very great way to put it. And so, you had mentioned it, and it was a very good point. I wrote it down because I've said this many, many times, that you don't judge a job by your last case or your last day or even your last month. Sometimes not even the last year.
Right.
You have to look at the overall big picture because the grass is not always greener.
No.
But with that said, if a job sucks and it is affecting you that much, you need to leave it.
Right.
You don't stay. If the job is that bad, leave. Your
Or
life,
you at
it's
least
not-
try to use the tools that you have to,
if you can.
if you can.
If-
And
yeah.
then if you can't, then
If you can't, if it just sucks and it's never going to get, it just has not gotten better, no matter what your best efforts have been. But I also think with it, because of our unique positions, we have to be somewhat flexible.
sure.
You can't, and you brought up a very good point, you will miss things. It's going to happen. You can't just throw a big fit when that happens either, because that then looks negatively upon yourself.
Of course.
And some people do. Not everybody is the same.
Right.
Having that, okay, this happened, but how often does this really happen? Let me put this in perspective. No matter how disappointed I may be at this very moment, is this really how it always is? And that's personal.
Well, and that you also have to be realistic. It's just isn't just happening to you
right.
in medicine or in your kind of on-call kind of, way that you have your job. It happens to everyone. A teacher can't just take off because it's the middle of the school year because something's going on that they want to attend. I mean, it happens in all
I don't know.
fields.
It seems like they can. I don't know about that. I know some teachers. It seems like they
It's just
can.
an example.
Okay, that wasn't a good example.
Anyway.
Okay, so superheroes, workaholics, perfectionists, and lone rangers. As an employer, I don't want to hire any of them.
Well, and those people, I think that those traits is what they were trying to say. They can sound negative. You could spin it to sound negative.
spin
You
it
could
any way
also
you want
spin
to.
it to sound like you're really awesome. I mean, I used to think that was the best thing to say in a job interview is, what's your worst quality? Well, I'm a perfectionist. It sounds so great. I really care about my job. Those are terrible people to have work for you. They don't want anyone else to, do their job.
That's the Lone Rangers.
And because no one else is competent,
Right.
so I
Right,
think
absolutely.
that those can all be, really, really negative. And I think the point is those are people who also isolate themselves when they're working, thinking that they don't need help from
Right.
someone else.
Yes, I know, and I understand that it definitely comes to that. But I think there's also, on the flip side, I think anyone in a supervisory role or employment role, employer role, big company, small company, doesn't make any difference, a government agency, doesn't matter what it is. There are people and places in those positions at times, and again, stressing at times, not everyone certainly, who will use those people essentially as fodder. They will just, hey, you want to go do all of that? Go ahead and do it, no problem. This is great. I expect everybody to be like this. And that's a failure on the part of supervision to manage that kind of thing, because we all have, you, when I say you, I mean all of us, have a responsibility to teach people how to treat us.
Yeah.
We set our own boundaries.
Right.
And if you don't set the boundaries, then no one knows where those boundaries are.
Right.
Simultaneous to that, people who are in supervisory roles have to know and recognize their subordinates in a way that maximizes their effectiveness for the jobs that need to be done, while at the same time having some level of recognition that that they have needs, and those needs need to be met at various levels. Now, there's always going to be limits.
Right.
Everybody's got a limit. But I think that both parties, whether it be the supervisor or whether it be the subordinates, it doesn't make any difference. Both parties have a responsibility. And
Absolutely,
I think one of the
right.
biggest problems that I find is a lack of good, clear, transparent, honest discussion, whether you agree or disagree. At the end of the day, being heard and listening,
Respected.
respected makes all the difference in the world. Even if neither party gets all that they want.
Even if you don't get anything that you want, knowing that you were heard
Exactly.
can sometimes be enough for, depending on the situation,
Absolutely.
you know?
So I'm guilty of that. I'm very guilty of calling, okay, because I'm up. It's 10 o'clock. It's 10:30. I'll call somebody. I've had to teach myself to don't do that. It's not necessary. This can wait. If I call at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night, it's going to be because there is a real emergency.
Right.
There is a dumpster fire. David, I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying it. There is a dumpster. But you also brought up the other thing, the optimistic part. Believe it or not, and I might not have shown it here today. David, am I a glass half full or a glass half empty kind of guy?
You're all the way to the top.
All the way to the top. Right. I try to stay positive, but again, those are practiced behaviors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your positiveness is practiced. Your
of course.
negativity is also practiced.
Right.
You know?
Well, and you also, I mean, you can change your culture with your behavior. You might not be able to change it to what you want, but if you are constantly negative, it can be effective to make others negative, and then it just makes it worse.
It's self-perpetuating.
contagious.
Yes.
Both
Yeah.
both are.
Yeah, it's contagious.
Positiveness and negativeness.
Right.
They're just contagious behaviors. I
Yes.
agree with you 100%. See, I have so many other questions. Why don't you ask some things? I could go on. I could go on with this conversation for probably another hour. So
I
I'm gonna
loved
let
your
you-
presentation. I thought it was very timely.
I loved both of them.
Very.
I thought it was very timely.
And we were the flip side of the coin.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had to got something very serious and something that needs to be said and needs to be heard. People don't want to hear, and something that can almost seem light, but also needs to be heard, because I think we're all looking for satisfaction in our life.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think it's important to know that it's not just an employer's responsibility or not just the employee's responsibility. It's a coming together and figuring out what it is that you need, because it's very fluid and very dynamic.
It's very fluid.
Absolutely. Yes, I
and
agree with you 100%.
balancing what you don't want to hear and the difficult things that are really out there with, whether it be your job or something going on in your personal life, but balancing the hard to hear with the uplifting,
Yes.
and not letting one or the other consume you, and setting that boundary and finding a way to make a list and schedule time in your life to manage it. It's a challenge.
Well,
It's
if you're
difficult.
burned out at work, think about it. You know,
Yeah.
if you're burned out at work and you have a demanding job, and you're burned out at work, and you just feel deflated, and you go home, how much how likely are you in that circumstance versus you have, pretty good job satisfaction. You love your profession, you love your career. Job's good, it could be better, but it's, not bad, it's good. You feel valued, you feel good about what you've done and accomplished and so forth. And then you go home. So take those two people and contrast that. They have two teenagers, an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. And who's going to be more aware in that circumstance of why are you taking your iPad into the bedroom?
Right.
What did you do today?
Well, and this was in that book. It's escaping me the name of it. The author is Bridget Schulte, and it's called Overwhelmed. Work, love, play. Who has time?
Yes.
It's a great read. She's very entertaining, but she talked about, she was making cupcakes at 2 a.m. and she was meeting this deadline, and she's in the teacher's bathroom at her kid's school when she's supposed to be watching a play, trying to do an interview for, she said, I was always doing, 10 things at once, but doing none of them well. I mean, she was doing it well enough at work. She was a good mom. I mean,
she was surviving and she was functioning, but it wasn't.
And what was kind of interesting, I didn't even know this existed, but they were trying to figure out how she got involved in a time study. Was they were trying to figure out why readership of their newspaper was down with women, because women, newspaper subscribers, had always been one of their highest demographics. And so they went out and interviewed people or sent surveys or whatever, and to find out. And the women were saying, I can't read. I have to do this. And I have homework, and I have this and this and this. And so she started, she was tasked with researching, if that's a trend, if that's this. And so she found this man that they call Father Time, who had been studying how people spend their days, just ordinary people. He's been cataloging it over his whole career. And so she went to talk to him about it. And he said, if I'm quoting it correctly, that he didn't believe the women didn't have time. They have 30 leisure hours a week. He doesn't care if they work, they're whatever, they have 30 leisure hours a week. He's been studying time, and she said, I don't have 30 hours a week. Sometimes, I can...
Maybe asleep.
Right.
Maybe.
And so he had her do a time study for a year. She had to write down every single minute that she did. And then she had to go meet with him afterwards, and he looks at it and he shows her, you don't have to give up anything. It's how you organize your time. And how many times are you doing something that doesn't need to be done at that particular time that could have been done at another time, and you could have been more functional and, in the moment of what you're doing at this time. It's really interesting. And she's an entertaining writer, and she made it very humorous.
Well, since it was Father Time, I'm assuming it's correct. so all right. Tracie, Tammy,
You're on a roll today.
I want to thank both of you for being here and giving these excellent presentations. Tomorrow, we're going to hear from Tammy again. Disasters, your family or your patients, and then me. And you're going to find out tomorrow, definitively, is a sole perfusion practice safe for the patients? You're the only perfusionist within 200 miles. Is it safe or not? You're going to find out tomorrow. And you're going to find out, when disaster strikes, do you run to the hospital or do you run for the hills?
With your family.
With your family, yeah. Well, it depends whether you like them. Sometimes not all of the family has to go.
Right?
Yeah, well, not all the family has to go. The in-laws, they'll be fine. Get them some floaties.
So crazy.
Okay, we'll see you tomorrow at same time, same station.